Before I start on today's topic, probably I'll just do a brief introduction of myself. So I actually used to be a Hong Kong qualified lawyer before. So I worked in the international law firm of Melvin and Myers, and then I mainly practiced in the areas of corporate and capital markets law for a couple of years before I transitioned to my current role as a legal tech advisor at Clifford Chance. And then let me just quickly tell you my personal story of why I really went into this space of legal tech. So when I was working as a trainee, as a junior lawyer in the law firm, I found that actually a lot of work that I did was quite repetitive. And then I always thought to myself, there must be a better way of doing that so that I can actually give more value to my clients. And then so that's why in starting in 2018, I actually started to spend really a lot of time, like hundreds of hours, learning to code in Python, as well as taking all these online courses in AI related technologies like machine learning and natural language processing. And then I finally understand how powerful software can really help us to, like, basically every one of us to do our work in a much smarter way. So that's something that I'm going to be covering in one part of my presentation, which is how you will also be able to take advantage of some of these legal tech tools in the market. But just coming back to my role with Clifford Chance, so basically I wear three hats here. First, I help with the legal tech adoption. Basically, I'm going to be a bridge between the fairness and the legal tech tools that we have. So I'm going to help them work smarter, meet deadlines, automate repetitive tasks, so that they can focus on the more higher value piece in terms of service delivery. And then secondly, on data analytics. So I help the firm to kind of analyze millions and millions entries of these timesheet entries, and I'm going to derive insight from the timesheet data that we have. And lastly, process improvement, which is basically to kind of change the way how we do legal work, and then make sure that we're doing that efficiently and deliver a better client experience whenever we're working on legal matters. So just moving on. Um, so the topic I'm going to be covering today will be threefold. Firstly, it's in terms of legal technology, of course. So that is going to be how you can take advantage of technology to save time, especially from doing some of these repetitive and time-consuming tasks. And then secondly, I'm going to introduce to you a concept called legal operations. So basically, it's something that you can use to streamline the operations of your legal department by using other techniques such as process improvement I mentioned before, and then some of these data analytics piece, they're equally applicable to an in-house legal department. And then lastly, I'm going to give you some tips when you're going to start your journey of practicing the making use of legal tech and legal operations to run your legal department. So let's dive in. Firstly, I'm going to cover some bits about statistics around legal tech so that you have more understanding around why this is important to your organization, to your in-house legal department. So firstly, I think in terms of legal tech, it's kind of like a buzzword. Everyone is talking about that. But what it basically means, I would say, is just a fancy term of describing any kind of technology that's going to help legal professionals to do their work in a much more efficient way. So it doesn't have to be something that is specifically developed for the legal industry. I always use this example of saying that actually Microsoft Office 365, um, the 365 suite, actually there are a lot of great tools, a lot of powerful tools. They're not developed specifically for lawyers to use them. So tools like Microsoft Teams, Planner, List, or Power Automate, actually all of them are very useful to just help you do your work more efficiently, but they don't have to be specifically developed as a legal tech product. So I will also classify that as part of the legal tech that will be useful to you guys. And then to go through some of these statistics one by one. So firstly, 82% of the lawyers who have adopted legal tech, there is basically a general consensus of lawyers using legal tech saying that it has led to increased efficiency. So that was the conclusion of a survey of 600 lawyers. So it's quite like a convincing based on the number of participants. And then another survey made by Clock. So Clock, it's a 3,000 member organization for legal operations professionals. They did a similar survey. They basically surveyed 200 plus companies in 18 countries. And then the results kind of suggested that in-house legal teams worldwide are also spending quite a substantial amount on using legal tech. So the average spending it's around $1 million per year. And there's this ratio of like for every $30 that you spend on external hiring, external legal counsel, you're gonna spend $1 on like buying some of these legal tech products there. And of course, I don't have to mention that in terms of the growth of funding raised by legal tech companies, over the past 4 years, it has increased by more than fivefold. So that's something that's very encouraging to see. And then moving on, what are the different types of common legal technology adopted by in-house legal departments? So it's also the finding of the same clock survey. So you can see there is actually a lot of different legal tech tools that you can use. But basically, the top three are e-billing system, contract management systems, as well as e-signing systems. So I think it's not surprising that you see e-billing, e-signature. I will always classify these as the low-hanging fruits. So they're very easy to understand, much more easier to adopt compared to other solutions. But it won't be my focus today because it's not like you shouldn't think about e-signature or e-billing. If you don't already have one, it's definitely something that you should think about. But today I'm going to be focused more on contract management software because I think it's actually going to make a much bigger impact in terms of cost savings, especially for larger in-house legal departments where you have a lot of contracts to manage every year. So that's going to be immensely beneficial to you. So I'll just dive right in. To make, in terms of the terminology, to make it more nuanced, I would say the correct name for these kind of contract management tools is actually called contract lifecycle management. So there's this concept called CLM. So the concept of CLM is actually it's a one-stop shop platform. So on this platform, you can basically manage every step of your contract cycle, from contract request or drafting, review until approval and storage of the contract. So basically, everything is going to flow seamlessly from one step to another. So you can manage every task that you need to do for every contract of your organization on this single platform. So that's the idea of contract lifecycle management. So how is that going to help your company? I think there are four clear advantages of that. So firstly, it's very easy to understand. The contracting cycle is actually sometimes a pain point, especially for fast-paced organization where they're concluding like hundreds of contracts every week. So if that's the case, then if you can really make use of a CRM tool, because these different steps of like concluding a contract actually it works more seamlessly having this one-stop shop platform. So you can definitely speed up the revenue generation cycle of the company. And then it's a big plus. It's going to help a lot for the business team. And then in terms of how it's going to help lawyers in a legal department to work, definitely I would say the top advantage would be helping you to save time in terms of searching for documents. I'm sure like if you're working in an in-house legal department or you worked in private practice law firms before, you would have the experience of trying to find a document, find a precedent, find a template, and then spend hours on finding the document. Ultimately, you couldn't find a document and you have to spend time recreating that document. So that's why I've seen a study that actually said lawyers typically lose 4.3 hours per week just for not finding documents that they need, and then they have to recreate those documents. So if you have a CRM system, every contract that you do on the system, every version, or even every comment that any user make, there will be a record. And then whenever you need a particular version that you've done a year ago, you can just pull that version up in a few clicks. So that's going to be really helpful, especially if you're often buried in these finding these different versions in your mailbox. And then thirdly, CLM is also closely connected to another concept that I'm going to cover more detail in my next slide, which is something called contract analytics. So what do I mean by contract analytics? Basically, it's the idea of turning legal documents, any kind of legal documents, into structured information. So say, for example, if you have tens of thousands of certain types of agreement, say it's a facility agreement, you can if you have a proper contract analytics solution, you can actually ask that solution to help you extract all the important terms from the facility agreement. Say, for example, maybe that's the definition of material adverse event. Maybe that's the events of default clause, the termination clause, the governing law clause. So all these kind of, I would call data points or full clauses, they can actually be extracted by the system with just a few clicks. So that's going to take advantage of machine learning in the back end. Of course, you're going to spend some time in training the system if the system hasn't seen similar clauses before. But just imagine if you have kind of like a regulatory changes driven type of work like Brexit or library papering, which is an example that I'm going to cover in my next slide. Just imagine the kind of time savings that it can help you if you have that kind of system. And then lastly, data-driven insights. So this is going to be immensely useful after you have proper contract analytics systems in place. So after you turn on your contracts into structured data, there may be unexpected ways that you can actually help your company to uncover how you can save more costs. So say, for example, in the case of procurement, now, because you may actually discover, because now you have digitized all your procurement contracts, you may have discovered that multiple offices in your organization are actually buying from the same supplier, which you actually didn't know it before. So now you can actually go to that supplier and ask for additional bulk purchase discount because that's something that is a new experience, like a new pieces of data that you can now leverage. And then, of course, another example, it's you've often come across like during contract negotiation, the other side maybe they're kind of inserting some clauses that are not acceptable to you, they're onerous. Then now, if you have the data, you can actually kind of use a data-driven approach to push back. You can kind of say that for a particular this type of like indemnity clauses, we don't even have a single instance of accepting these kind of indemnity clause through our past 100 sales contracts. So you can now have your data to back up, and that's much more convincing if you have to advance your position in your contract negotiation. So moving on, contract analytics. As I said before, I'm going to give you an example of how we as a law firm took advantage of that. So for example, because I think like contract analytics is going to be basically, it's going to transform how these large scale document review projects are going to be done in the coming few years. So say, for example, library papering often is going to involve tens of thousands or even millions of documents like these facility agreements, these Easter documents that you have to look at. And then you have to determine whether that actually is subject to the repapering exercise. So that actually depends on a number of factors. Maybe you have to look at some of these data points that you're seeing on the screen, whether the document, the term of the contract is going to extend beyond 2021, or it's a IBO rate already referenced, what's the fallback mechanism. So if you have a system that actually automatically have you pull out all of these data points from your millions of contracts, then you wouldn't have to spend time with data extraction. You can immediately use these data to think about how you can use think about your repaving strategies and scope. So after you turn them into structured data, you can also kind of visualize them in charts. And then these are kind of filterable charts. If you click on the charts, it's actually going to direct you back to the underlying data. So that's immensely helpful in such large scale document review exercises. And then just moving on, a quick word on another type of legal tech tool, which I find very helpful, and is especially relevant for in-house legal departments. I would say it's even more useful for in-house legal teams compared to law firms. It's a tool called document automation. So basically, it's the idea of turning um, the process of drafting standardized and repeated documents from a free text drafting process into a form filling exercise. So the cost savings can actually be immense. There has been cases where in-house legal departments, they're basically saving more than 90% of the drafting time of a particular type of contract after they've used a document automation solution. So this solution is ideal for documents that are standardized, which basically means the different variations that you find in the contracts, they can actually be reduced into like a choices or multiple choices instead of like free text edits. And of course, you have to prepare this document frequently, otherwise you wouldn't be able to like have the benefit of the solution of the scaling. And then ideally, if you just so basically this solution, you will have an interface where you answer a bunch of questions, and then the answers will actually be populated into a set of templates and help you generate the documents. That's why if one set of answers can actually be used for generating multiple documents, like for example, all the documents that you need for transferring shares in a company, then it will be very helpful. So you don't have to type these information in different documents over and over again. And of course, you have to control the template. Otherwise, it wouldn't really help you. So there are actually a lot of document automation software in the market. You have things like Contract Express, but of course, if you don't have a budget yet, you can think about like simpler solutions like mail merge. That's free. That's one of the feature that you can use in Outlook and Word, or like these no-code platform, which is part of the Microsoft 365 suite, which is called Power Automate. They can help you to certain extent do document automation. But of course, there is going to be certain learning curve because they are not tailored made for the legal industry. So moving on to the second topic for today, legal operations. So firstly, let me just briefly talk about what means by legal operations. So basically, legal operations professionals, they are a new breed of people. They actually work inside the legal department, but their main responsibilities is not doing legal work. So they basically help lawyers inside legal department to increase the efficiency of how a legal department is run by using things like maybe legal tech is part of the solution. There are other techniques like data analytics, process improvement. So it's a very established concept in developed jurisdictions like in the US. Say, for example, Google actually has a legal operations team of 60 people. The last time I heard about that. Um, but it's still a pretty nascent concept in APAC. So let me just give you some examples of how legal operations professional can help you. For example, firstly on financial management, so they can actually do a budget forecast and then kind of identify what kind of cost saving opportunities that may be worthwhile to pursue. And then implementation of legal tech is basically a selection and rollout of suitable legal technology to help with efficiency and process improvement. So you may have heard of concepts like Lean Six Sigma or continuous improvement. So the idea is actually to map out how a piece of legal work is done. And then after you map out the process, you think about how you can do the same piece of work in a more efficient way. Is there any unnecessary steps that you can eliminate, or is there something that you can automate? Are there any time-consuming tasks that you can automate? So that's the gist of process improvement, which I'm going to go through in detail in the next few slides. And then data analytics, I would say like for lawyers, it's kind of like a pretty foreign concept, but it's actually going to be really useful to help you kind of make better decisions because now you have objective data to back up your decision. And then if you have any process improvement projects, you can also kind of quantify your cost savings having that data. So for example, you can actually set certain metrics or key performance indicators when you're running RFPs, and then you can use these KPIs to evaluate the responses to your RFPs, as well as if you have the data around who is sending you, like which business team is like, interacting with you most, you can kind of prioritize what resources you should focus on for each of these teams that you are helping. So lastly, knowledge management. It's very similar to a KM function inside a law firm, basically helping with the organization of templates and policies. So yeah, also on a couple of statistics that I think is going to help you better understand the legal ops dynamics. So based on a survey that Thomson Reuters have done, they basically surveyed 200 plus legal departments, um, I think this year. So they found that 81% of the legal departments already have a dedicated legal ops team. So as I said before, it's actually a pretty established concept in markets like UK and US. And then the average number of legal operations professional that you can see in a mid or large size legal department, it's around 5 people. So they have a ratio around for every 6 to 13 lawyers that they have inside a legal department, they're gonna have one legal ops specialist. So Clock also did kind of like an estimate as to the amount of potential cost savings that a legal ops professionals can help you achieve. So that's around 330K USD. So that's quite a lot. That's why it's something that you should definitely think about. Um, if you haven't already have legal ops professional working alongside with you. And then just diving deeper into process improvement, as I said before, just think about the work that you do as kind of like an assembly line process. So if it's a piece of drafting work, maybe there are 7 different sub-steps that you have to do. And then you should like map out the whole process. Say, for example, who currently is responsible for each step. And then you will start to see, for example, which step is actually the bottleneck, or some of the steps actually they are unnecessary. So you can start eliminating some of these unnecessary steps, or just having a centralized person, having one person to be responsible for a certain step. So the goal is actually to get your process for handling every kind of legal work in a standardized manner. So everything needs to be standardized. Um, and then you will be able to just speed up the work that you do in a much faster way. So that's the gist of how process improvement is going to work. And then just moving on in terms of data analytics, as I said before, not a lot of legal professionals actually appreciate how useful is that going to be. But just think about if you now have the data for you to just kind of better understand or quantify how your legal department is currently running, you can have a clearer picture of, say, for example, what everyone is doing on a day-to-day basis, or how many requests. You can show a distribution of requests coming from different business teams, as well as the hours spent on each major type of legal work that you do for these different business teams. So now you will have a much clearer picture in terms of how you're going to prioritize resources for these different business teams. And then, as you can see here, one thing that you can do is actually to log, have something kind of like Excel spreadsheet, or more importantly, like if you have, this is a tool called Microsoft List. you can actually log every issue that is coming inside to your legal department. And then like you have things like whether it's a high priority task or what's the latest status of a task or who is currently responsible for handling that task. So if you have a log sheet like that, it's gonna be very useful for you to like allocate resources as well as at year end. You can kind of go back at the data and revisit whether there's anything you can improve, anything you can do better, or like for a certain type of request, it may be taking too long. There may be complaints from the business teams. So how you can improve on that. So these kind of data will form the backbone of what you're going to do, like in terms of these reviews at year end. So yeah, that's all I have to go through, like in terms of legal tech and legal operations. And lastly, just one slide on some tips of how you should get started. So I would say most importantly, you have to start small because a lot of times you can think of very ambitious project that may potentially have an enormous impact to how you work. It's going to have you say 30% of the cost maybe 5 years later. But if it's something that takes a lot of resources for you to start, then it's not ideal because maybe after you started for a few months, then maybe people could have lost interest because they don't see the immediate benefits. So that's why the always number one advice that I would think you should think about is actually how you can start small and then you can gradually grow the project size that you're going to tackle. And then of course, if you have some ideas, just let me know and I'm very happy to follow up with you. And then also, if you are kind of like a global organization, just talk to your colleagues in your headquarters, in other offices, because a lot of times, when I'm just speaking to in-house lawyers, they always talk about, oh, why, where, like, how can I find like these document automation solutions or these CRM solutions? Maybe like other offices in your organization are already using some sort of these software. So it's always worthwhile so you speak to them and then understand what they are doing. So that's going to help you a lot, maybe. And then, of course, think about building your legal ops capabilities. Just think about the statistics that I've gone through. It definitely worth the investment. And then, of course, just generally, just take a look at what's happening in the legal tech or legal ops market. So there are a lot of materials, like, for example, I mentioned the organization clock before. There are other websites like Artificial Lawyer. It's a very useful website for monitoring what's happening there in terms of legal tech development. So yeah, if you as you learn more about legal tech and legal ops, you will have a better idea of how you can apply the same in your organization. So that's all I have to cover today. Hopefully, it's gonna help you to kind of
Okay.
kickstart your journey.
Yeah, so Mr. Cliff, there is a Q and
Yeah,
a there for you. So someone
sure.
asked if there's any reminder for contracts to renew.
Yeah, there's a very good question.
Yeah, so you
It's
can explain more
actually
on this. Yeah.
sure. It's actually part of a feature that a lot of the CRM tools would have. And I would say that it's actually a very good use case. So because a lot of CRM actually there are two ways you can do that. One is it depends on how intelligent that CRM solution is. So the easiest way to do that is actually set up manually. So every time you finish drafting or you're in the process of drafting a contract, you just pull in the expiry date of that contract. And then you will be able to set alerts maybe 30 days before the expiry of the contract. It's going to send you an email alert. So it's very simple to do that. The more advanced way of doing that is actually in relation to contract analytics. So the solution is actually going to automatically pull out the term of the contract, the expiry date of the contract, every time you draft a contract. So you don't even have to do that manually. And you can set up kind of like a global policy that you're going to receive these reminders 30 days prior to the expiry date. So yeah, there's a very good question. And then I think most of the CRM tools out there should have that feature for you to use that. And then just a quick word to supplement document automation. It's also like a common feature that you can find in a CRM tool.